Identity is tied up in that because the culture around us, the culture in which we work and live, that's where
Mm-hmm.
they value it.
Mm.
And so I think as Christians, that idea of our value doesn't come from what the world tells us. It really comes from who we are and who God's made us to be.
Oh,
And so, how do we stop listening to that culture and start listening to what God has for us?
As you know, we use this platform to share stories of resilience. And today I have a very special guest. Hey, it's your host, Sally Allen again. Welcome to the Sally Allen podcast. I am so glad you're here. And today I have an extra special guest. I know I say this, but he is extra, extra special. My friend, David Diers. And I love his t-shirt. It says, "Walk humbly." We'll talk more about that. But David, welcome to the Sally Allen podcast.
What a pleasure to be here. Happy to be
Yes,
here.
I am so thrilled that you were here. David is surprised. He didn't know that this was going to be video. So we're going to have a little fun with it today.
There you go.
So I want to properly introduce him. David has been a corporate executive for 38 years in the telecommunications space. He recently found his new calling, and I'm so excited to talk to him about this. He's a father of 4 children, adult children, 6 grandkids.
6 grandkids.
Six
That's right.
grandkids. And he has a passion for community transformation. And that is truly so because he has such a heart for helping people. So, David, welcome. So before we start, I want to give you a little back intro how we actually got to know each other.
Wonderful. I was going to say community transformation brings it all together because we've had some journeys together.
Yes,
here.
we actually we were sitting on the reach board. That's where we met
That's
first.
right.
We sat on the reach board at the Crossing Church. But where I really got to know David is we went on a mission trip to Poland. Right, a group of us went to Poland, and it was such a great trip. It was such a wonderful trip, and we had to walk everywhere. So as we walk every day, we're switching different people and we talk to, and I got to know him and his heart. And what his shirt says, "Walk humbly," that's truly who he is. And I was so excited when you walk in with that shirt because this was my opening that I rehearsed. And so when I saw that shirt, I'm like, this was meant to be. I was meant to introduce him like this. He has such a heart for helping people, transforming community. But just, I was telling someone when we came back, when you're talking to David, when you sit there and you're talking to him, he actually listens. He does this active listening thing. You know that you're being heard. I know I'm embarrassing you. I know
Yes,
that
you
you're
are.
being heard when you talk to him. But even if someone sidetracks the conversation, the thing about him, and I don't know if you know you do this, he comes back and he says, continue where you left off, and he reminds you where you were. And throughout the whole trip, I observed that, and I'm a coach, and I thought, that's how I want to be. I do active listening, but not the way you did it. So I was so I was so it was so much inspired me to be a better coach and to be a better active listener. So that's my opening, David. Welcome to the Celia.
So we did some walking and we did some talking, I tell you. And we did some community transformation together at the
We
same time, which is
did.
absolutely wonderful.
Lots of community transformation. It was
Yes.
such a powerful trip. But I invited you to the Sally Allen podcast because I want to talk about your journey and where you are and what you're doing right now. Because you are a corporate executive for 38 years.
Yes.
And then when we were in Poland, you were praying about what you'll do next and where God would lead you. And then all of a sudden, I saw an announcement and you are a pastor for our Highlands location. How did that happen? So quickly, too.
So quickly and
Yes.
so unexpectedly.
So unexpectedly.
And maybe there's a lesson there too. It's sometimes we get going down our path in our ways, and perhaps we just need to take a pause once in a while, get our eyes up on the horizon, and listen. And perhaps God's got something different for us. And
Yeah.
sometimes we get so busy with life, right? We don't even think of those possibilities. But when we are in a pause, how do we honor that pause?
Yeah. And I remember you talking about that pause. And we were brainstorming. We were talking about different things, right? like, you should go into consulting. You're so good. You have so much knowledge. We don't want that
Sally,
knowledge to
you
go to
had
waste.
so many different ideas for me, and I'm going, okay, I was going to take 8 to 9 months, just pause, reflect, not think of anything. And you're going, but you could do this, and you can try this, and you can try this.
I had so many ideas. So now, how did this whole thing happen with the crossing? Somebody asked you to be pastor
Yeah,
of
yeah,
Highlands?
and it's interesting. So Highlands campus is our third campus at the Crossing Church, and there was an existing church that came and approached us, and I was serving on the elder council at the church at the time, and they had asked, "Would you consider us becoming a campus of the Crossing?" And so, as elders, we were praying through that process. We were doing the due diligence. And for me, it was just, it made a lot of sense. This is what the Crossing has done. This is a very similar church that we've invested in over the years, and they were looking for our help. And so, when we made the decision as an elder council, yes, this is probably the right thing to do. This is how we feel God leading us. I had no idea that there'd be any personal involvement with me in that whole decision, right? So I'm going through the pause, and I'm just, again, just exploring and saying, God, what's next? Retirement didn't quite seem right. Karen and I made the decision that we weren't going to relocate out of Las Vegas.
Right.
And so if I was going to stay in the company, it would have meant going to Atlanta, another location. And at this season of life, we're just saying, probably not. You know, our family's all here, our 4 children, our grandkids. And so is that idea, okay, there's something else around the corner. Not certain what that was. But I had some friends who sat me down. They said, David, we really think you need to honor the pause. You're in a pause right now. You're wired in such a way that you want to go, 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 go. You've got a gift of time right now. Take the pause and honor it. And I think that was just helpful advice from my close circle of friends as I was going through this process. And when you and I were in Poland, as a matter of fact, we had some of these discussions. And I remember I got a call from our senior pastor while we were there in Poland. And I'm not sure if I shared this with you or not, but he called me up and said, hey, David, can we get together for lunch tomorrow? Just want to bounce some ideas off of you. And I said, well, I'm in Poland, Shane. I can't meet with you right now. He said, Poland? Okay, well, I'm going to ruin your trip right now. I need to throw something out your way, and I just want you to think about this. And he said, you know, when I and Scott and Lee come together, and we've been listening, and we just think that you need to consider becoming the campus pastor at Highlands. And I just thought, okay, I'm not the target audience or the target age of what we want for a campus pastor. Obviously, I know about the situation and everything. And I remember I texted my wife and I said, interesting, I think I might have got a job offer and we're not supposed to be looking yet. And so through that whole process, Karen says, well, you realize we respect the church. We respect these 3 individuals. And if they are saying this is something for you to consider, we start from yes rather than starting from no.
Yeah.
Now, I'm an engineer. I like things logical. I start and build my case, very reasonable. But that challenge to start from yes rather than starting from no, I think was a transformational thinking for me. So, and then fast forward through that, we went through a process of discerning and praying and validating with others. And there were no hurdles, no red flags that came up. And so how could I, as much as I was trying to build an argument, say, no, it was yes, yes, yes.
Wise woman, Karen is in the room with us. So the thing that's going through my head, I remember when we were in Poland, when you were talking to Shane and we tried to get you to come dance with us as we were dancing with the community. And I remember this because we were like, David, come on. And he's, I'm on with Shane. I'm on. How funny. I remember that moment specifically. We did get him to dance with the community. But
that was kind of ironic, wasn't it? You know, the other interesting part in Poland, if you remember, we had some other churches that we were working with.
Yeah.
And we were painting in one room, and one of the gentlemen painting next to me said, so you're from Las Vegas, right? And I said, yes, I am. He said, well, you know what? I know somebody in Las Vegas, and he pastors a church there. His name is Vince Antonucci, and he pastors Verve Church. Have you ever heard of him by any chance?
Oh, wow.
I'm going,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, I have, because we were in discussions that way.
Yeah.
And I just found that fascinating and then it was that very day that I got the phone call saying, we want you to consider something here.
Wow.
So interesting how God sometimes just weaves something in to help just do a little preparation before the shock comes, right?
Yeah, but also give a little confirmation, right?
Absolutely.
It's a little confirmation. What are the odds of some guy in Poland
That happens
right?
to
It
know the
happens to know the
person.
person who's in the
Absolutely.
first church. You're like, okay, God, you're trying to say something.
Yes.
What are you trying to say? I love that.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming your qualifications to be there. Obviously, it was a message they heard clearly from God and the Holy Spirit. But how did your corporate world experience prepare you for this position?
Yeah, great question that way. And you and I have talked about leadership quite a bit. And for those that are in leadership, understand that the platform you might have for leadership might shift
Mm-hmm.
in seasons, in time, but the skill set or the passion or the giftings traverses those different seasons of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so leadership is leadership, whether it be in the telecommunications, whether it be in the community, whether it be in
That's right.
something like the Crossing Church. And so, from that perspective, the platform shifted, but the giftings and the calling stayed the same.
Mm.
And I think that's one thing I've been learning. You know, the giftings and callings that God has placed on an individual's life. Throughout life, you go through different seasons, you go through different transitions. Your platform might change, your tactics might change, but the gift and the calling,
Calling. Mm-hmm.
they will traverse every season that you go through.
Absolutely, absolutely. I usually say that the foundation stays the same, the values, the mission, but tactics may change, but the values and the mission and the foundation remains
Absolutely.
rock solid.
Absolutely.
And our
Absolutely.
church does that so well. They do it so well. We pivot when we can, but the foundation always stays the
Absolutely.
same. So I love that. Um, I can't even read my own handwriting. Sometimes I write down so fast and I can't. Like, what did I write down? So I want to know, like, your children' initial reaction. We got a little personal here when they heard this. Dad, like, what people say about PK kids. What were your children's? Let's have some
Well,
fun here.
and again, I would like to consider myself a very logical, structured individual, right? Because
Right,
I'm an
right,
engineer by training, right?
right.
And so part of the process, the discernment process, was even though we were starting from yes, and I walked through this with Karen. First of all, there's got to be yes from my wife.
Yes.
There's got to be an affirmation from those who know me best, that have walked me through many seasons of life, and there has to be an affirmation from my family.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we walked through each one of those, I remember we were at a family reunion actually, and all of my kids were there with all my siblings, and we pulled all my kids aside and said, "Okay, we got to have a family discussion here," and shared with them the possibility. Shared with them, I need your input on this one. And I still remember my grandson Mason. He looks at me and he says, "Grandpa, absolutely."
Wow. He's 16, right? Is Mason
Yes.
16? Okay,
Yeah.
I
Yep.
remember you
Yep.
talking about it.
And then my kids one by one started building a case. This is what you've been prepared for. This is right for you. This, we see you in this role. And so when I got that affirmation from my children, which again, our family is very important to us, that was, again, I was waiting for somebody to say, "Yeah, have you thought about this?" But nobody did. And it was affirmation after affirmation. So from that perspective, yeah, it was a fun process to go through.
I think your heart, sitting on the board with you for a couple of years, what I've seen is the servant leadership. And I think that's so important when it comes to leading people, having that servant's heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were most knowledgeable than all of us there, but you would always be the last to speak. And that speaks of your heart and your servant's leadership. So no one's surprised once you see this. No one's surprised that this is what you're doing. So what do you think is your biggest responsibility for the congregation?
Right now, it's a little bit different than when I first came in because we were adopting a church into the Crossing family. And so, objective number one was how do we pastor and provide stability to this congregation that is obviously going to be going through some transitional times? How do we build relationships quickly? How do we support them? How do we love on them? How do we encourage them as they're processing these changes, saying, "Oh, we're not our separate church anymore. Our pastor is no longer our pastor. Here's this new guy coming in." And so, for the first 3 months, our whole target was how do we pastor those people that were still there to help them through the transition. And since then, and this really happened around the first of the year, as we injected different crossing individuals to come and join us on that journey of Highlands, now you've got two different cultures coming together. And how do you allow those cultures to meet, to interact, to feed on each other, to create the culture of the Highlands Church going forward? And that's really kind of the phase that we're in right now. We're really on community building, relationship building, so that we can provide that foundational for a growth strategy going forward.
I love that. I think sometimes people feel like with the church that it's churchy and you don't treat it like an organization and have strategy and structure to it, and you do have to have that
Oh, yes. Oh,
in
yes.
order. Yeah, yeah. And I learned that with our church. I never really got to see behind the scenes. I'm like, wow, you kind of have to run it like a corporation in order for
Yeah.
it to be successful. There's God in the center, but you need strategy.
You got to have strategy that way. And I learned
Yeah.
that back in the Twin Cities, I was in charge of an integration project. The Twin Cities area had two different cable companies in there. I worked for one of them, and we were acquiring Time Warner, which is the other side. And so my goal that year was to build a team that we would integrate these into one organization. So Comcast was adopting Time Warner.
Yeah.
And so the idea of understanding the unique cultures that exist, understanding the leadership structure that exists, and then saying what is a time period that would be reasonable for us to be able to take similar processes, have them implemented so that we can, instead of being two, be one.
Yeah.
And so a lot of lessons learned from corporate mergers and acquisitions from that
Yeah.
perspective as well.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. So what is your biggest challenge that you think you face every day as a pastor?
For me, I've been trained as an engineer. I've been rewarded as an engineer. I've been rewarded on being effective and efficient and driving all of that. When you're in the people world, you're not necessarily measured on effectiveness and efficiency,
Right,
right?
right.
So I've got to remind myself constantly, individuals will take time. How do I establish relationships? And even though I thought I was doing that in the workplace, the bottom line was we had things to produce, we had gadgets to develop, and how do we do that most effectively, most cost effectively efficient? So taking that transition into the church life is like, okay, people are our currency. We're
Yeah.
talking about lives here. We're talking about people that are going through struggles, and how do we help them through those struggles so that they can realize the goals, the purpose, the ways of God for them as individuals. So it's a
Yeah.
different way than building networks that I'm used to. Now, how do we build up people? So
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And it's quite a, like you said, leadership, it's a transferable skill wherever you go, the leadership
yes,
skills. It doesn't change who you are and how you lead. For example, being a servant leader, you take that everywhere you go.
very true.
However you lead, you take it. You're taking your person, you wherever you go,
Very
right?
true.
Yeah, yeah. So I had a question in my head and it flew out. So let me think about it. That's it. I found it.
Let me do a little add on first, if
Yes,
that's
yes.
okay.
Yeah.
And you and I volunteer at the church, and we've been involved in the church for a while. And really, for the 38 years that I've been in the corporate workplace, the church has always been active. And so it's like, how do I serve the church? How do I serve the community through the church? And I think the other transition I had to go through was understanding that being a volunteer, being part of a church is we do the work of the ministry. And now that I'm coming into a campus pastor position, my whole focus is now how do I train others to do the work of the ministry? And that's been a transition that I've had to try and focus on as well. Instead of just go do what you and I just love doing, right?
Right,
No,
right,
how
right.
do we train up others to do the work of the ministry? So that's another challenge that I've
So
got
that's
as
the
a campus
question I was
pastor.
going to ask. And
Okay.
you answered it before I ask it. Because what's going through my head is Moses' father in law. Remember, he
Yes.
was talking to
Yep, Jethro.
Moses,
Yep.
right? He was talking to him about you need people to help you and you can't do everything. And I was going to ask you, how do you, is it hard for you to do that? To not get into the weeds, but you have to lead at a level now where you're overseeing everything. And how do you stay sane with that and
Yeah.
not going into the weeds, but
One
leading?
beautiful gift through this transition is I have a co-pastor, Margaret Nitzel, who was the executive pastor at Verve Church, and she came over to the crossing, so her and I serve as pastors for Highlands together. And Karen and I have known Margaret and Nathan for 8, 9 years. We had a small group together in our house. We were doing ministry life
Wow.
together, and all of a sudden our lives come back together like this. And one thing I appreciate about Margaret, she is so good at identifying and raising up leaders.
Mm.
That's her gifting. She trains people extremely well. And through the midst of this transition, as we're coming into a new structure, the idea is how do we start building teams in the different ministry areas we need? But more specifically, how do we now identify and raise up people that might be a team leader over these different ministries.
Mm.
And so we knew that that was going to be a struggle for the first 5-6 months, as Margaret and I really had to say, okay, we're the limiting factor right now, but we've got to train up leaders so that that will free us up to do things that only we can do.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we're in that stage now where we have identified people, and people are kind of stepping up into different leadership roles, which really offers a freedom and then community building in addition to that. So
Yeah. What are some of the things that you're doing at Highland for community building?
very intentional phase right now. We needed to get into small groups, so we've initiated small groups. And we had a couple that were coming from the past that we said, keep going. And then we initiated some combined groups here just a couple months ago. And so on a weekly basis, these people are getting together, building relationships, doing life together, praying together, serving together, which has really helped. I know Karen and I made an effort initially to try and do a lot of coffees and dinners with people that we didn't necessarily know. And we've shifted that now where we have people into our house pretty much every week just for dinner. So we'll take 6 people plus Karen and I. It's an intimate time. We can build relationships that way, start building some of understanding and start doing life together from that perspective as well. And then even just this last week, we had what we call a chill and chili. So we invite everybody to come to Highlands, hang out on a Saturday night, bring your favorite chili. We're going to vote on it, who's going to have the best chili. Bring your kids, bring your family. And there was probably 80, 90, 100 people there. And we just had a blast. 13 different chilies. Everybody sampled them all, gave away some prizes, had fun, laughed, all that kind of stuff.
That's truly being intentional, because you have to put your not just your time out there. You have to be present and show up also.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes such a huge difference when you're present there. So I love that. So how do people get to know who Pastor David is? Tell us a little, get a little personal here. Tell us a little bit about what do you do to actually prepare yourself, like every Sunday before you go to church. What are some of the things you have to get into that mindset? Right? How do you prepare? Or even throughout the week, what does your self-care look like? I
was going to say the idea of a Sunday, and again, that's the critical day for in the church world, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where we have everybody coming together, and we want to honor God through that process. But it is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It is really what are you doing during the week?
Right.
Just personal health care for me. I get up a little bit before 5 o'clock every morning, and that's when I have my devotional time, my quiet time.
Yeah.
And I need to do that before things get going crazy and phone calls and texts and emails and stuff like that. So that's just a discipline that works for me. From that point on, then I usually hit the gym and do my physical workout. And then by the time we're ready to start work, quote unquote, hours, then I'm able to start jumping into the meetings and stuff like that. But and again, I'm a pretty structured, high structured individual. So having those routines for me is really important.
Yeah.
And so what am I doing in the morning? What am I doing in the afternoon? What does my evenings look like? And doing that repetitively, I just find comfort in that. So for me, I have to develop those processes. I have to develop those systems. And it took a little while where, again, I'm used to the workplace where I have a cubicle, an office, someplace to hang my hat. And now I don't have an office, and I don't have a place that I go.
Karen didn't give you room?
She gave me... One thing that I did find out, which is interesting, because you talk about resilience all the time, right? And that resiliency is different. But so sometimes I got to work at home office, right? Because I'm not at one of the campuses.
Right.
And when I'm home, I got a little break before meetings. Well, I should be useful, productive. So what I discovered you don't go into the pantry and reorganize the pantry.
Yeah.
I discovered that's not my domain. That's my wife's domain. And so we had a few of those struggles early on when she...
Did he color code it?
It's like, why are you organizing my pantry? This is my domain. So, got it. So that was a transitional item that we had to work through as well.
Yeah, I think I'm like you. Is your calendar booked from like 5 a.m. till the end of the day you go to bed? Because that's my calendar. I'm so structured.
That's what it is. I love the structure. And again, I know not everybody is like that.
Oh, yeah. It freaks people out. When I tell people I have a vision, like a 20-year vision of what my life would be like, you look like, I can't even think till the end of the year. Everybody thinks differently, right?
Very true.
But for you probably have your vision like planned out for the rest of your life.
Well, back to the pause, one thing that was important for us early on in the pause, we realized there's some things that we just weren't ready for, prepared for. Things thinking about retirement or financial planning or having our household in order, things like that. That you just put them off. Well, someday we'll think about that. And so I remember one of the things that we learned a lot was we took a trip a week down to Mexico just for Karen and I, just to, well, we do this every quarter. We do what we call a marriage escape trip. And so that one, we specifically said, we're in a whole new season of life. Let's lay it out and say, God, what does this look like?
Mm.
And one of the tasks that I had while we were together was we wanted to define the Diers family values and actually put them on paper. And the idea of whatever time we have left, we've already invested into our kids. They're adults. But for our grandchildren or eventually our great grandchildren, what are those values that we want to intentionally invest in with time, with resources, with our activities to make sure that those Diers family values are propagated to the future generations?
Wow.
And that was just a fun exercise to do. And obviously, I wish we had done it 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was pretty easy at this season of life to say, well, this is what we enjoy, this is what we do, this is what we have done. But now to have an intentional strategy, what are we doing to invest in our grandchildren and eventually our great-grandchildren to make those carry on?
Right. I
So,
love that. So did you guys come up with value words?
we did.
Are you
Yeah,
okay
we did.
sharing?
Am I okay sharing? I think we're okay.
Okay.
As only my wife can do, everything starts with an F. Oh, we got to put these in order, right? So faith is an important value for us, obviously. The idea of friendships and having people that are close to you that you can go through life with is very important for us as well. Having fun.
Yeah.
Fun is on there as well. And so, again, we just enjoy traveling with our kids and our grandkids and just having some fun activities together there. This one doesn't quite start with an F, but being philanthropic
Yeah, yeah.
kind of sounds
It
like
sounds
an
like
F,
an
right?
F, yeah,
So,
yeah.
but that idea of how are you volunteering or
Mm,
serving or giving into your community?
I love
And
that.
that's really important for us. Then the last one is F is family, of course,
Yeah.
which is part of it.
Yeah,
So
I love that. I'm assuming you guys came up with a mission statement also, didn't you?
we came up with the ideas, how do these look? And then, so then the question comes, how do we put these into the practice? And how
Yeah.
do we start propagating these out, having a family meeting saying, by the way, this is what we want you to do.
Yeah.
So simple things like we have a picture frame in our kitchen that just scrolls through pictures. And our grandkids just love seeing all these pictures. So I took a picture for each one of those words and I wrote the word on top of it. And so without them even realizing it, they're
Right.
seeing family and faith and fun and
Yeah.
philanthropic, and they're seeing the pictures that describe those activities that we do as well. So
Wow.
kind of a subtle way for us just to
Little
remind
subliminal
them.
messages
Yeah,
when they look at it. So
that's
it's
right.
okay. I
So,
love that. Absolutely. I think it's such a great way for people listening to this that it's so important to have your values that you live by.
yeah.
Um, the Aaron and I just went through this also that what do you make decisions through? Like, what do you filter your
Yes.
decisions through if you don't have values? And it's
Yes.
so important. So I want to pivot a little bit. If somebody's listening to this and you took a really left the corporate world and you didn't know what to do. But for somebody listening to this and they're like, man, you honor the pause, but I don't know how to do that. Like, what do I do? There's a lot of layoffs going on right now, right?
Sure.
What would you say to someone who's thinking about what is the next step? What do I do?
Yeah. I think first part I would say was just you just need to assess where you're at currently. You need to stop and you need to take inventory. And sometimes when we have an opportunity for a pause or some break in our normal activity, it causes us to be defensive rather than being proactive.
Mm,
And so I'd say stop, take assessment of your current situation. The idea of what do I have for assets, for resources, for gifts, for calling, for family, for support structure, all of that might be around there. Take that assessment and then start praying and start dreaming. Okay, God, this is what I've done. This is what I've known for such a long period of time. What would you have for me? And that idea that stop, pause, listen, and see if he gives you affirmation of where you're supposed to go going forward. And you might need to circle yourself with those that love you and know you best. Circle around with them. They can speak to you in times like that. For us, it was two couples that we've gone through life with, and our family was the important part. And then I think most importantly is resist the urge that you have to do something.
Mm.
And again, for some of us that we've been trained for years, this is just what we do. We're at high pace, go, 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 go. It's okay to not have a plan. And it's okay to take a pause. So those might be a couple practical things I would
Wow,
suggest.
that was really good. I was saying, wow. That was really, really good. The hardest part, which I think a lot of people struggle with, is feeling like because you're always on the go, 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 and all of a sudden you feel, I don't have a worth anymore. I'm not serving a purpose anymore.
We get our value wrongly by what
That's
we
right.
do,
That's right.
not in who we are.
Are.
And so when we
Yes.
stop and we take that assessment, it's like, here's
Mm-hmm.
who I am. Here's what God has gifted me to be.
Mm.
Here's what my callings, my gifts are. Here's what He's placed around me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not what we do. None of it's based on
Yes.
what we do.
It's not. A lot of us so much put our identity into what we do at work, which I remember when I left, all of a sudden I was busy, 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 busy. And then in the next 24 hours, I don't have anything to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize how much your identity is tied up into that.
I would offer to you that identity is tied up in that because the culture around us, the culture in which we work and live, that's where they value it.
Mm.
And so I think as Christians, that idea of our value doesn't come from what the world tells us. It really comes from who we are and who God's made us to be. And so how do we stop listening to that culture and start listening to what God has for us? Right?
Yes, and that's your process. It's stop,
Yep.
and just ask God who you are. Sit with Him in
Absolutely.
that time and find out what your gifts are also.
There is. There's this Hebrew word in the Psalms called Selah. You're probably
Yes,
familiar
yes,
with
yes,
it.
yes, yes.
And my buddy reminded me, says, you know what Selah is? It means to stop, pause, and think about it.
Yeah.
And how many times do we in our lives just blow by things? We don't stop, we don't pause, we don't think about it. And perhaps we're rewarded. Maybe our culture rewards us for just don't go, 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 go. So when you put the rhythms in your life to stop, pause, and think about it, now perhaps we have a chance that we can actually hear what God might have for us rather than just continuing doing what we think is the right thing to do going forward.
That's so speaking to my heart because, if you don't live a purpose-driven life, you have to be intentional to have those
Yes.
pauses.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, yeah. There's that here. Very good. Now, I want to make sure that, is there anything you want to share that I haven't asked you? Or you want to talk about that?
Well, I know your theme for your podcast oftentimes on resiliency.
Resilience, yes.
And that whole idea of resiliency, oftentimes we think of as an individual. How adaptable am I? How open am I? But I got to tell you, there's a part of life, because God has called us to be in community with each other, where perhaps we need the resiliency for those closest to us.
Mm.
How do we help those closest to us when they're going through times of change, when they're going through transition, when things perhaps they're caught up in the whirlwind of life as well? And again, I think the challenge for us as believers, when He's called us into relationship and community, how can we be that gift to those around us? And it's not a me-centered, it's a they-centered. And are we so busy in life doing what we think is the right thing to do that we miss opportunities to show that resiliency to others as they're going through transitions as well?
Mm. Give us a couple of pointers on that, what that looks like, that that resiliency to others. How do we do that?
Great question. And by the way, the older we get, the less resilient we are as well. And I've had to remind myself that. And so,
Oh, is that right?
what
Okay.
can we
Good.
intentionally do
Yeah.
different? And
Yeah.
think about it. We think of our parents or our grandparents. It's like when they got old, they just kind of got set in their ways. Right?
Oh, I see where you're going with this. Yes,
And
yes,
so many
yes, yes,
times
yes.
it's like, okay, how do we not be set in our ways, but keep an open mind, keep open ears, keep an open heart, rather than letting the culture or the world or experiences just kind of put us into this mold? So I think there's intentionality that we need to do individually to challenge our thinking, listening to things that we wouldn't normally listen to, get around people who look and think differently than we do.
Yes.
And when you're in that community, then I think, and you can recognize the differences, you can say, what do I have to offer that perhaps could help this person in this particular situation? And I think right now I've got a friend who's just going through some struggles right now, and some health issues with his mother and some other things like that. And it's like, okay, I've experienced that before, and that's tough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how can I offer any insight or even just an ear or just a support to say, let me know how I can help you? I've experienced this before. And again, get out of yourself to say, how can you help other people when they have a tendency to get really rigid or really that they need to be able to flex and adapt to what's going on around them?
Yeah, I love what you said, asking that person, like, how can I be there for you? How can I help you? Because sometimes we think we know what people want.
Yes, yes.
Most of the times we don't. So
We got to ask.
we got to ask. Oh, and you've been married long enough, you'll be like, okay, you better ask, do you want me to listen or do you want my opinion? Can you relate to that? What would
Well,
you
even in a marriage relationship,
Yeah.
right? And so we joke all the time, guys, we like to fix things. So sometimes our wives might come to us and they're saying something, and we go into fix-it mode right away. Come
Right
on,
away.
we can do this. No, I just want you to listen. Don't need to do anything, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the needs of the individuals around us are different and unique. And we
Mm-hmm.
can't assume their needs are going to be the same as ours. So we've got to enter into that relationship, ask them, how can we come alongside you during
Yeah.
this time?
Yeah. So, David, you hear a lot of hard things. Like people come to you probably difficult things being a pastor. And how do you protect yourself from that and you know protect your mental space?
Yeah. For me, and again, maybe it's because I'm a fairly high structure individual.
Mm-hmm.
I know I need to empathize with individuals if I'm going to be able to build a connection and be able to speak into whatever situation they're in.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, the struggle they're going through is their struggle, and I can't go through that struggle on their behalf.
Mm-hmm.
I might be able to walk with them through that struggle,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that God has a plan. I know that God has a way, and I know that God is in control. So now it's like, how can I just be of assistance to what God wants to do at this moment with this particular individual?
Mm-hmm.
But I know it's not me. I can't walk through that on behalf of somebody else. They have to walk through that. And through that walking, and you know, when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we'll fear no evil, is what we're said. But it also says, surely his goodness and his mercy will follow us
Mm-hmm.
all the day. So he never leaves us.
Mm-hmm.
And so now as a pastor, how can I come on, walk through that valley with them, knowing that God is walking with them as well,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
knowing that there's only goodness and mercy, they're going to be following them.
Mm-hmm.
And so not taking ownership on me, but how do I support, right?
So you've over the years, I assume you've built that resiliency in that sense that you know, like, okay, I'm going to be here because it took me a while to do that as a coach. You know, I
Sure.
take on everybody's problems, but
Yes.
it seems like you've done that over the years and you've worked that out and now you know how to do it. You know, but you're speaking about it, the thing that comes into my mind is I'm thinking about a butterfly and being in that cocoon. And if you try to take out, you know, help that butterfly to come out of that cocoon, you kill it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes, and again, our culture says this, speed of life says this, let's move on. I want to get through this trial really quick. Guess what? The journey is in that trial. That's where the refinement happens. That's where God reveals himself.
Yeah.
And so we can't shortcut that, just like you can't shortcut it with the butterfly, right?
Right. So you said people have to walk through that trial because I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, God, unless you find that lesson that God has for you, you will continue to walk through
Absolutely.
that
Over and
fire.
over and over again. He will
Right.
have his way in our lives, right?
Right. That's awesome. So do you have any parting remarks for our audience or anything you want to say?
Parting remarks. Maybe let me come back to resiliency. And I love this this analogy. I'm from Minnesota, and we have these big, beautiful oak trees there, and they're massive trunks. And then right next to them, you have these poplar trees, and they're really skinny. And you know, when the wind blows, they're just flapping in the wind, right? And we had tornadoes up in Minnesota, and I remember when a tornado would go through, and hopefully it didn't hurt anybody, but you would see these oak trees, and they would be snapped in half. These huge, beautiful trees, and they're just snapped in half. And then you'd see these poplar trees right next to them. They're standing up nice and straight. And so I think of, regardless of when a tornado or the storms of life come your way, if you don't have that resiliency like the oak tree did not have, that's where the break comes. That's where you snap. And so that idea of how can we increase our resiliency like that poplar tree, that when the storms of life come, we're able to flex, we're able to adapt, we're able to adjust to situations out of our control. And I think that's the part that I need to continue to remind myself. How do I adapt? How do I be flexible and not be rigid and set in my ways?
Wow. I don't see you being rigid and set in your ways, but Karen no better. See, she's shaking her head.
And the older we get, the more established we get. So, okay, maintain that flexibility.
Maintain that flexibility. You know, I always love the poplar tree, but I will never look at it the same again after that analogy. Yeah, it's the one with the shimmery leaves, right? The leaves shimmer, and I love there's something about it that I absolutely love. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. It's just been such an honor for you to share and being open and honest and vulnerable with our audience. It's a really powerful episode. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Sally. And again, let me just affirm you, the work that you're doing in our community, the work you're doing at our church, the work you're doing on these podcasts to give people a view of the future and modeling that behavior for us. I just want to thank you for that as well.
You make me feel uncomfortable.
Good.
Thank you, David. It's hard for me to be on the other side. I appreciate that one. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And Karen, thank you for being our audience. And thank you, Joey, behind the decks. And with that, it's a wrap.